So, YCS Anaheim was cool. Unrelated. I've been getting back into Master Duel recently and, well, Yugioh is a bad game for several reasons. While I'd love to talk about all of them, the one aspect that I wanted to focus on today is opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is incredibly critical to how we find games fun, and I think it can describe a lot about why Yugioh might be rather unfun. You probably already know what this is, but just so we're on the same page, opportunity cost is the cost you pay for doing something. If you're playing an RPG, and you can only buy either a sword, shield, or armor, the opportunity cost of buying one is that you don't get to buy the others. Depending on how much you care about RPGs, this decision might be interesting for you. Different players may come to different conclusions about which piece of gear they're buying, and then have to live with the consequences of their decisions. In something like an action RPG, when you're fighting an enemy, you can choose to attack or dodge. But once you're swinging that sword or dodging for a number of frames, you can't do the other. Either action is reasonable. Depending on what kind of player you are, you might gravitate to doing one over the other. However, it's unclear that there's a strictly correct decision, and each of them lead to a novel gameplay scenario where you'll be making more player decisions or wheeling yourself back to the nearest grace because you died. I like to call this the fuzziness of gameplay. Bringing this back to Yu-Gi-Oh!, you could say that the opportunity cost of normal summoning a monster is that you cannot normal summon another monster in the same turn, but how much of a cost is that really? What's the opportunity cost of doing anything in Yu-Gi-Oh! I'll make it clear that I'm speaking from the perspective of a Master Duel player who loses with Sky Striker and Master Rank because I'm too busy drooling on myself to see that I got drooled after my first engage. Oh my god, I love Ray. The support card is going to change my life. But I've also played several other formats, including Kitchen Table Ice Barriers against Cyber Dragon Summon Infinity. And if there's anything I've learned over the years, it's that even though a format may be good momentarily, like a recovering addict, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a tendency to fall back into combo slop. Let's take a look at this Rising land. We could use any of these Ryzel starters and make Duo Drive, or we could normal summon Ash. Wait a minute, we could actually do all the Ryzel starters and still normal summon Ash. It should be to nobody's surprise that the touted hyperlinear deck doesn't have a lot of choices for navigating its turn. The choices are the line that actually does something and the line that doesn't do anything. You could actually say that the opportunity cost of doing anything suboptimal is very high because if you don't execute it correctly, you'll lose the game. But that's exactly the problem. There's no other reasonable decisions to weigh it against. And while Ryzel is a simple deck made to be simple, I genuinely feel this way about all combo decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's certainly a degree of skill spent deciphering a hand and executing it, but it basically amounts to do as much as possible with as many effects as are packed into your deck list, then convert it into your end board. Congrats. Like, sorry, but I've played Adamancipators. I don't feel very smart for pressing every golden prompt and summoning Block Dragon 70 times. If meaningful decision making due to the opportunity cost of my actions is at one end of the spectrum, I'd say that comboing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at the other. Just go to town on your opponent and see how far you get. But what if we play Malice? This hand has normal Dormouse with redundancy to path into the Link 1 versus an Imperm, but what else could this hand realistically do? It could lead Underground into White Rabbit, in which your Dormouse fetches Chessie, and potentially your opponent gets to Imperm the White Rabbit, White Binder, Red Ransom, Chessie activation, and you might be saying to yourself, well, we have a game here, don't we? Anyone who has played Master Duel in the last 3 months knows that the single Imperm doesn't matter. All these lead to full combo, and it doesn't matter where the Malice player started, barring some edge case scenarios. And this is ultimately the problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! The cards are too powerful. They're actually so powerful that we literally have a term for players who somehow manage to play Master Duel competently despite not knowing what they're doing at all. Like, yes, Turbo. And the reason why this even works in the first place is the principle that I described. There's no other reasonable decision to weigh any of your decisions against. Playing all the shit from your hand, it probably makes something is the best thing that you could be doing. Listen, I understand that there is a degree of skill expression with executing a combo, and I like playing combo decks too. My favorite deck in Shadowverse, an eternity ago, was Rhinoceros Storm. But for me, the skill testing and fun part of playing those decks were the setup turns. The decisions made while drawing cards and manipulating my deck, whether it was worth it to remove threats and how do I stave off the aggro player that was trying to ram my skull into the ground. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't have that for any of its combo decks. It just feels like a game of Go Fish with my opponent's hand traps, and once I'm clear for takeoff, it's an unskippable cutscene, not just for my opponent, but also for me. A large criticism that Yu-Gi-Oh! Gets is that there is no resource system. While this complaint is valid, I'd like to elaborate on why it's valid instead of pointing at Magic and asking why Little Bro didn't pack any lands in their game systems. The core reason why resources are important at the systemic level is because it inherently creates opportunity cost for your decisions. Do I spend 4 mana to play my big guy, or do I play a little guy and hold up a removal spell? These are both reasonable decisions that will lead to some kind of gameplay, and after a few more decisions, players can reevaluate what they'd like to do. In Yu-Gi-Oh! You could say this manifests in which do you play first. Sequencing could be very important, but based on the Malice example, that isn't really the case. If anything, I just want to highlight the fact that because you can special summon just about everything from your hand, deck, and graveyard, that it can lead to a lack of interesting decisions because why wouldn't you just full combo? There's no opportunity cost imposed by the game systems for doing so. So maybe comboing isn't a great example for meaningful decision making, but what about the nice meaty decisions once you have your interaction in play and you need to stave off your opponent's turn? With this incredibly simplified Lyrilyte board, every card the opponent plays is a potential detonator pop, and every monster effect is a potential cross-activation. You could even wait for a chance to show them your Plazusi if you don't want to activate any of those other effects. Choosing what you want to pop and where you want to negate based on your knowledge of the game is actually a reasonable example of opportunity cost in action. Versus most decks, you can't just fire detonator at everything because the last card in their hand could be a starter. The cross-activation is once per turn and even eats up a detonator charge. So, you have a resource restriction that mediates the decisions of whether you pop or negate. The opportunity cost. Holy what? In a complete vacuum, this board could lead to a myriad of gameplay situations. But we know Yugioh does more than this. Yugioh Mitsurugi actually ends on something like this. So actually, instead of evaluating any of the opportunity cost of our actions, why don't we just throw a mixture of our negates and pops and recur a 3200 while also drawing all the cards in the world, and we're back to square one. Anybody could figure this out. It's not hard to understand that our 4+ pieces of interaction probably line up well against our opponent's 6-card hand, or better yet, 4-card hand because they were dumb enough to run hand traps and you still made your entire end board. The goal of many modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks is to have the resource game won before you, as the comboing player, have had any meaningful decisions, and before your opponent has even had a chance to make any meaningful decisions. It's a math equation at that point. End board has enough negates. Sounds good to me. Concession. Setting aside gameplay for a moment, there's another area of opportunity cost that is quite integral to card games. That being the opportunity cost of including a card in your deck. If you include one card, you could have ran a different one. The effect of this decision becomes pretty obvious with cards like Raigeki. Card is very strong, but doesn't do anything if your opponent doesn't have a board, so it doesn't do much going first. This is fairly critical, as most going first decks would rather perform as well as possible, provided they won the coin flip. But like, what's the opportunity cost of sideboarding into 3D barriers when you know you're going first? Theoretically, drawing a card that doesn't help you combo or build your board should mean something. That would mean that there's an opportunity cost for the cards you include that aren't directly associated with your game plan. However, modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks have become quite strong. They've gotten so strong that 3D barriers is just a standard sideboard plan. Because almost every card can become your entire end board, you can have a few bricks, still have a good chance of full combo. And that's just the problem. While in theory it's cool that Yummy Mitsurugi exists, their end goal was to create this scenario. A combo that can play through disruption and make an end board that has more interaction than you have starters. I feel like Old Man yells at Cloud at this point, but I do legitimately think the problem with Yu-Gi-Oh is that the cards are too powerful. There's no realistic opportunity cost to any of the special summons you do because if you get negated, the only decision is, do I have another starter or extender? For the player on the defensive, you're hoping the interaction is enough, but if the choke points are solved for, then that doesn't really have any meaningful decisions either. And that's assuming they even work! The game has been digging this hole for a long time. Slowly ramping up the power level of cards, then the answers to those cards, then more extenders to beat the answers, and we've ended up in a format where every card presents full combo and hand traps can't keep up anymore. So what now? Print even stronger hand traps? Then what? Starters which actually are 2 cards for free for some reason? Where's the fuzziness and the interesting gameplay decisions? I want to give credit to some of the card design that I think, in earnest, is trying to make the game fun by giving players interesting decisions. The Mitsurugi negate, for example, has a discard attached to it and is once per turn. Because it's not just a negate, there's some fuzziness for how a player wants to deal with the effect. Maybe you think one starter can get there, so you pitch the worst starter. Maybe you're just letting the negate resolve because you have 2 Raigekis and your blind second deck. Or maybe you're a freak like me and you're pitching rollback for insane value. Talents presents a wide variety of options if it's online. Maybe taking Malice's Terahertz is good. Maybe forcing March here by looking at their hand is good. Maybe it's good because they only have 1 card in their hand. Or maybe you need more gas because engaging into engage is broken. Detonating across in a vacuum is actually incredibly fair, and should theoretically lead to fun decision-making as I outlined before. They're just paired with every single other engine under the sun. And White Binder, despite being part of the most annoying deck on the planet, actually has a lot of decisions to make regarding when you choose to activate it, and how much you use it to grave hate your opponent, versus how much you use it to summon your monsters. I can tell these cards were made with the intent to give players interesting decisions, and it's a shame to me that every format just becomes a race to the bottom of how broken players can make their turn 1. And I can't really blame players. After all, the cards are so powerful that you literally need a D-Bear to stop your opponent from doing anything, but the thing that makes me sad is that there's potential for cool Yu-Gi-Oh cards with cool effects and interesting decisions to be made. Personally, I like playing decks like Labyrinth, which give me a lot of decisions about how I want to interact with the opponent, and it's doubly painful because I'd love to search Ghastly into for when my opponent off of Backjack, but the meta has pigeonholed me into searching D-Barrier just to compete. As long as the design team at Konami believes power creep is the way to go, and continues to allow degenerate combo slop in their card design, I don't think this is going to get any better. I haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but it's also why Genesis seems so promising. Because every engine is limited due to the point system, it seems like decks can only do 1 to 2 strong things before entering the fuzzy zone of draw steps 3 through 6. As I said at the beginning, this is just one aspect where I can see problems with the game. The actions a player takes while comboing effectively have no opportunity cost due to the power of the cards, to such an extreme degree that Click DS Turbo is an observable phenomenon. The endboards are so powerful that there's basically no opportunity cost to blowing your fat load of interaction as soon as your opponent breathes, and the cards are so powerful that you can actually get away with running 3 silver bullets post sideboard in your deck without much cost to your full combo draw at all. Hopefully this gave you a new perspective on how to scrutinize the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! And let me know what you think in the comments below. I don't know, type TCG will save the game if you've been drooling on yourself the entire video. I'm gonna go check if there are any new Gelbura entries for Lady Labyrinth. Have a nice day.